think we are live. Are we live, Jerron? Not quite. Okay, thank you. Well, happy Monday, rainy Monday. What a week. Hope everybody is safe and hopefully we'll all dry out in a couple of days. So I'm Dr. Almeida. I'm the Director of Behavioral Health Services for Fort Bend County. I know a lot of you have joined us throughout the month. We really are appreciative. And even some of you came out and joined our mental health awareness walk. It was unfortunately, we had to reschedule it from the 12th to the 21st. However, we are so appreciative. We had representation from courts, HR, risk management, health and human services, of course, the county judge's office, and several other departments within the county. So it was great. I think we had about 100 people, maybe a little bit more, and great event. Really, we brought that together so we can work to reduce the stigma around mental illness, and so people have more information and more knowledge, which is really our strategy. We believe that by providing information, we will reduce the stigma around mental illness and get more people into the right care at the right time. Again, of course, our CIT was also representative. So we have a great relationship with our sheriff's office and our crisis intervention team. And we'll be doing that again next year. So this is we have one more seminar after this, which will be on Wednesday, there'll be a live attendance option at our Justice Center on the 3rd floor. And we will be talking about the mental health task force that Fort Bend County is forming. So it'll be an opportunity to hear from a variety of different departments and the task force members. So today, the main presenter is actually Chrissy Lee, who works with Behavioral Health Services. She's one of our licensed psychological associates. I've been with the department, I think, a year and a half. Does a lot of our psychological evaluations, or most of the psychological evaluations for the courts. So I'm delighted to have her. She's also a great trainer and a great presenter. And we're going to talk a little bit about anxiety and fears in terms of, resuming normalcy, and not quite sure what that is. And I think that is part of the challenge, is how do we define that? What is normal? And I think it's going to be different than our lives before the pandemic. And but how do we get back to those things that we had before the pandemic, what our life looked like? And some of it is around school, some of it is around family gatherings, some of it is around work. So we're going to talk a lot about that, because clearly there is a lot of anxiety and concern about, going back to school or going back to the workplace, or, having large family gatherings. So I think with that, Chrissy, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then I'll add a couple comments here and there, and maybe some things that we're, looking at doing in Fort Bend County. And as always, these are available or will be available on the county website. Our IT department's been amazing in terms of providing the support for this. And Fort Bend County Behavioral Health Services is a department of the county, and we're here to support you all, and reach out to us if you have questions or need further information. Okay, Chrissy, turning it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Almeida. So as she stated, my name is Kristen Lee. I am the licensed psychological associate here for Fort Bend County Behavioral Health Services. And so, like Dr. Almeida mentioned, today we're going to be talking about resuming normalcy and some of the anxiety and fears that might be associated with that. So we know for the better part of a year, we have all been working together to kind of manage this pandemic, manage the results and the consequences of that. And so with the coming pandemic, we experienced maybe some anxiety and some fear, right? This was an unprecedented event that we had not really experienced in our lifetime. And so as we kind of gravitate out of that, right, looking towards the future, looking to see what our new normal looks like, there might be some anxiety and some fears associated with that as well. So today we're going to discuss those a little bit and then talk about some tips and some skills and some effective interventions that might help us work through some of the symptoms maybe we or our loved ones or someone we know is experiencing. So first, let's talk about anxiety, right? What is anxiety? So when we think about anxiety, a lot of times stress gets grouped into that, right? Sometimes stressors that we experience in our lives can cause us to experience anxiety. And it's important to know that there are good and negative stressors that we might experience. So stress is defined as a normal psychological and physical reaction to the demands of life, right? So we might experience familial stressors, the birth of a new baby, a marriage, maybe starting a new job. Those are some examples of positive stressors that we may experience in our life. Possibly the passing of a loved one, being diagnosed with a terminal illness. Those are some examples of some negative stressors that we might experience. And so, as I mentioned, stress can sometimes bring about anxiety. And anxiety is referred to as the intense, excessive, and persistent worry and fear about everyday situations. It's important to know that experiencing occasional anxiety is a normal part of life, right? So, just like I mentioned, those everyday stressors that are maybe associated to our work life, our family life, our school life, those are a normal part of everyday life. And a little bit later, we'll talk about where it crosses the threshold from not being normal or healthy anymore and is negatively impacting our health and in our life. So regarding anxiety and COVID-19, many of us have experienced, increased levels of stress and anxiety. Some of us lost our jobs. I think most of us were sequestered to our homes. The way our everyday life looked became very different. Some of us, considered essential workers, were having to go to work every day, while others of us were sequestered to our homes, and so our life looked a lot different. So, with COVID-19 and all of the circumstances and consequences attributed to that, some of us did experience a level of stress and anxiety. And so as we look forward to how things look post-pandemic, this might also bring about a mix of emotions, right? We may feel excited about the possibility of being able to see our family and our loved ones again. But then we also may fear the unknown, right? Because we don't know what things will look like in the coming weeks, in the coming months, even the coming years. So it's important to understand that everyone reacts to stress and anxiety differently, and stress and anxiety about the unknown is normal. It's perfectly normal to kind of worry or feel apprehensive about things that we can't see or that we don't know are coming, especially if you're like me and tend to be a little bit of a control freak and like to be in control of things, know what's happening. If you don't have that, and you kind of have to rely on people or things that you are not aware of, it can be anxiety provoking. So multiple challenges daily can push us beyond our limit or our ability to cope with these stressors. So let's talk about some signs of anxiety, right? We may say, okay, well, Chrissy, you're talking about a lot about anxiety and stress, but like, what does that look like? How do I know if maybe I'm suffering from or experiencing anxiety? So regarding, our emotional selves, it can be feelings of apprehension or dread, right? We just really dread maybe getting up out of the bed or like dread having to like go on with our day. Um, maybe feeling tense or jumpy. You notice that you're easily startled, and that is different from maybe your typical demeanor or how you typically behave. Um, Anxiety can also look like feelings of nervousness or feeling restless or just feeling really tense, right? Not really being able to relax. Having difficulty concentrating. So maybe your fears and your worries about what things will look like, going back to work, sending your children to school. Maybe those thoughts are so persistent that you're having difficulty focusing on the things that you want to focus on. And you may have difficulty controlling those worries that you feel or that you experience. And so it's important to know that anxiety also shows up in physical ways in our body as well. So this can look like pounding or racing heart, a shortness of breath, or maybe rapid breathing. It can be sweating in our body. Maybe you have trembling hands or shaking hands, or your legs tremble, or different parts of your body tremble or shake. It can look like headaches, maybe a decrease in your energy, feeling really weak or tired, having difficulty going to sleep or staying asleep throughout the night. And then it can also present in gastrointestinal issues. So maybe you have an upset stomach, you know, or different symptoms like that can indicate that we are feeling anxious or experiencing an increased amount of stress. So it's important to know that anxiety does not just affect us as adults, it also affects our children as well. And so it's important to know what anxiety looks like in our children. Um, and this can present as tantrums and irritability. So maybe you know if you typically have a pretty mellow, pretty even keeled child, and you notice that they are more irritable, maybe more tantrums than normal. They're just like they seem to be overreacting to maybe typical things that they did not typically overreact to. This can be an indication that they're feeling stressed or anxious. This can also look like either withdrawing from others or being excessively clingy to their caregivers. So if you notice your child is typically social and they tend to be more clingy, towards their parents or caregivers more than usual, this can be an indication that they are feeling anxious. Similar with the
Chrissy, could I add a comment?
Absolutely.
It was interesting when you were talking about the signs of anxiety in adults and signs of anxiety in children. I think one of the things that over the years I've always reminded people to consider, before they diagnose anxiety is, really see or rule out any other medical conditions. For example, if you're, I mean, for example, diabetes or high blood pressure or migraine headaches, so I think it's just really, or some sort of infection, not COVID, but, something else. But I think it's always important to, even in children, young children can be very prone to ear infections, which can obviously impact the way that they behave or they react to things. So I think it's really just kind of as a reminder, always rule out medical conditions, so it's always a good place to start is, go get a physical, go talk to your primary care doctor, pediatrician, to see what else might be contributing to some of these things.
Absolutely, Dr. Almeida. I think that's a great point. That we want to make sure that we look at other factors or other circumstances that might be contributing to the way that we feel. Absolutely. So a couple of more instances that might indicate fear and anxiety in children. If you notice that they have a loss of interest in things that they typically enjoy, things that they typically like to do, or if they indicate to you that they are feeling sad or feeling hopeless. And sometimes, in our children, they're unable to verbalize how they feel. They might not be able to tell you, "Mommy, I'm sad," or, "I feel scared," but they may complain of a stomach ache. or a headache, or that they feel sick. So as Dr. Almeida mentioned, we want to rule out, sickness, illness, other medical conditions, and see if there is not another underlying factor that is causing your child to present in a way that is not typical for them. So we've talked about anxiety, right? We've talked about stress, and we've talked about fear. So what are some ways that we can address anxiety and fear, particularly in our children? So it can be helpful to normalize their feelings, right? And to be encouraging. You don't want to, it's important to have developmentally appropriate conversations with your children, right? And so as your parent, as their parents, you can kind of gauge what you feel like your child can handle or not. But normalizing their feelings, it's okay to feel worried, it's okay to feel sad, and maybe talking to them and seeing, what the root of those feelings might be. It can also be helpful to do a fun activity together with them as a nice distraction, right? To kind of get them out of their head, do something that they typically enjoy that gets them up, active, and smiling again. And we all know that it's important to understand that for children, routine is really important. So trying to maintain their routine, and trying to make things, as consistent as possible day to day, as is possible. So, as we transition out of being quarantined, out of being sequestered at home, out of being locked down, and we, kind of find this new normal, right, and figure out what that is. Some of us might still be experiencing fear about the illness. We have had a rollout of vaccines. We see that the infection rate of the disease is decreasing. But because this is an unprecedented, condition that we have never dealt with before, there is a lot unknown about how the illness or how COVID-19 may behave, in the coming months or the coming years. And so that can bring about a level of fear and anxiety. There can be concern about, if I have been vaccinated, can I still contract the virus? Can I still spread the virus to others? Concerns regarding short and long-term effects of the COVID-19 vaccines that have been rolled out. So, regarding the vaccines, whether you have or whether you have not been vaccinated, it's important to document your symptoms. You talk with your doctor or medical professional about what it is that you're experiencing and what the best course of treatment is. And additionally, we might still be feeling or experiencing concern for our loved ones that might be at a higher risk of contracting the virus. So it's important that we continue to wear our masks and social distance when appropriate, follow CDC guidelines. And even as we move out of this pandemic, it's important to maintain those healthy practices, right? Those practices of cleanliness and washing your hands, and frequently sanitizing our surfaces. So some of us may be experiencing fear of returning to work, especially for those that have been under lockdown during the pandemic and maybe have been afforded the opportunity to work from home. There might be a requirement now for you to return back to the office. And so for those of us that have been home, there is uncertainty about what that looks like, right? You might be experiencing concerns about the commute. I know during the lockdown, I thoroughly enjoyed not having to fight Houston traffic to get into the office. And those are some things that might bring about anxiety for some people, having to resume that commute back to work, right? Maybe there's concerns about, what the policies are in your office, whether you're required to wear a mask, whether you're required to social distance. Maybe if you've only been in a small bubble with your immediate family members, being around those that you haven't been exposed to maybe in the better part of a year can be anxiety provoking. So it's important that you discuss your concerns with your employer, right? If you're feeling unsafe, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling fearful, discuss those with your employer and figure out what their policies are for returning back into the office. Um, and just with kids, adults do well or benefit from, routines. So it's important to develop a new routine that works for you and to try to remain consistent as best you can. Um, Consider discussing maybe a hybrid schedule with your employer. Not saying that is, will 100% be granted, but it's something that could possibly or potentially be discussed. Um, you know, Maybe doing a hybrid schedule of both working from home and in the office, to kind of gradually move back to, a new normal. And also, this is a great time for a new start, as many businesses are hiring new employees. I think every day on my commute home, I see a different business that has a now hiring sign in the window. So if you have, unfortunately, been at home without employment for the past few months, this is a great time to get out and maybe get a new start, find a new position, and see, what a new change can bring about in your life. So for our children and for our parents, there might be a fear of returning to school. So it's important to understand that it is normal for children to experience mixed emotions about returning back to school with others, right? So they may feel really excited that they get a chance to see their teachers and their classmates and friends that they haven't maybe seen in person, depending on what their school attendance situation has been like for the better part of a year. So they may feel really excited about that, but may be apprehensive about being back in the classroom full time, right? Especially if they've been at home on the computers. Um, it can be anxiety provoking, maybe if they've been in a bubble with their immediate family and have not really been interacting socially with others outside of their family. That can bring about a sense of social anxiety for some of our children as well. So, similar with just, general anxiety, general fears, general sadness, it's important and can be helpful to have a developmentally appropriate conversation with your children. Um, Something else that can be helpful is gradual exposure to social situations, right? So if they have not been leaving the home, if they've only been interacting with their parents or their siblings or people living in the home with them, it could be a good idea to, in small pieces and small bits, expose them to social situations with others. So that could be maybe a close neighborhood friend, maybe a close friend from school. And I think Dr. Almeida maybe wanted to share some more information about that.
No, I think those are excellent points. I actually had a discussion earlier on around, this anxiety of children going back to school and sort of the trauma that children have been feeling and, and I know you have a slide on this also later, but, a lot of children have experienced loss. They've either unfortunately, the death of somebody in their family, or they know of someone that has died due to COVID. So we really have to pay attention to that. We really have to pay attention to this grief, this bereavement, and also the fact that I think everybody's heard the term like compounded trauma or complex trauma. So it's, one event after another. Unfortunately, we live in an area where, we have a lot of weather-related crises, disasters, where children are displaced. I mean, we had the freeze back in February, a couple of years ago. We had Harvey, we have flooding. But so really have to think about this, that, children that have had more of these traumatic events, death of a parent, the loss of a parent, the divorce of parents, unstable housing, you know, might be more vulnerable, you know, at risk of developing those anxiety disorders or in some of that complex trauma. You know, so really being aware of children's traumatic history, because in how individually they will respond to certain things. And unfortunately, they might seem like they're doing okay, and then there's one trigger that really can, you know, something can happen that can really trigger these anxiety disorders, this, you know, anxiety, this fear, this really much more of a drastic change in their behavior, you know, where they really can't regulate. And so just kind of being aware of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so in, excuse me, in conjunction with, you know, the gradual exposure to small social situations, another thing that can be helpful for children as they, you know, as they transition back to being in school full time is possibly a video chat with their teachers or their school administrators. And this can be an opportunity for both the children and the parents to ask maybe pressing questions or address concerns they have about students being back in school. Maybe driving by the school on your commute or, you know, during errands can help maybe familiarize the child with that commute that's going to be happening back to school. Maybe planning a school visit where the child can kind of go inside of the school and see what their classroom will look like, what the school will look like, can be helpful for them. And so while we're addressing this fear of returning to school, I also want to address situations where, you know, those of us that have experienced milestones maybe this year or last year missed those celebrations that would be typically attributed to those milestones, right? We think about our seniors who graduated from school during the pandemic. And so how they missed out on, you know, the accolades and the celebration that goes along with that. So one thing to consider is maybe future gatherings, right? Maybe planning something in the future, or like a small celebration with family or friends, to, you know, commemorate that experience. Of course, you know, we can never give them back what it is that they lost during the pandemic, right? But planning a future gathering that still celebrates them, right? Still acknowledges them for their accomplishments might give them a sense of maybe not regaining what they lost, but help them to feel a little bit better and still feel, you know, that they have achieved that milestone. So, you know, we've talked about a fear of the illness. We've talked about a fear of going back to work, a fear of going back to school. And there is just a general fear of the unknown that we might be experiencing. You know, as I mentioned briefly before, we are trailblazers in the sense that we have never been through a COVID-19 pandemic in our lifetime, right? And so we don't really know what the coming weeks or months or years will look like. And so some of the fears of the unknown might be associated with contracting the virus, maybe when we will reach herd immunity and what that looks like. And herd immunity just means that a certain number of the population is, you know, immune to this strain of the virus, and it's not like pandemic status anymore, right? So maybe when do we reach that? What does that look like, right? Finding a new normal in regards to all of the fears that we've discussed previously, like returning to school and to work. Maybe losing that convenience of being able to work at home and having to be back full time in the office, and what that looks like. And then just generally reacclimating to society, right? So we've had the convenience of food being delivered to our house, working from home, you know, and not having to get up and get fully dressed and going to the office. And so some of us might be losing those conveniences and those luxuries. And so that can be a stressful or anxiety provoking thing to have to confront. Um, and another, point of fear regarding unknown, right? We don't know what things will look like, is grieving losses that have occurred during the pandemic, right? So these could be losses of relationships, losses of celebrations and milestones, and can also be losses of our loved ones. Um, and so in dealing with grief as a result of the pandemic, right? COVID regulations have prevented us from participating in certain grief rituals. So many of us who have lost loved ones during the pandemic, maybe we're not able to be at the bedside of our loved one during their last moments. Um, some of us were not able to have the memorial services or the funerals that we typically would have had to celebrate our loved one. And so whether you're aware of it or not, those grief rituals help in the healing process, in the grieving process, and to help bring about a sense of closure. So because we haven't really dealt with something like this on such a wide spectrum, it will be interesting to see what the long-term effects of that will be, because we just really don't know. A lot of us are grieving in a way that we never have before, because so much has been taken from us that we're typically used to. So similar with, celebrating milestones, planning future gatherings can possibly help to bring about a sense of closure for those people that we lost and did not get to celebrate in the way that we typically have. So that can be, planning a future memorial with family and friends, maybe planning a balloon release, or, doing something with family and loved ones that person maybe enjoyed while they were still living. Um, Even though, we can't get them back, we can't go back and have the appropriate maybe grief ritual that we would have wanted to during the time of their passing. Still doing something to commemorate them could possibly bring about a sense of closure and help us to heal. So it's important to know that if your grief continues to disrupt your daily life beyond a degree that is healthy or that prevents you from, keeping your normal routine, maintaining your responsibilities, maintaining your health and your hygiene, then it's important to reach out to a grief counselor or a mental health professional. So just briefly, a few concerns regarding reacclimating to society. So we've been in this pandemic for over a year, and people have become accustomed to the lives that they've built and the routines that they've created in their COVID caves, right? Their little sanctuaries that they've created in their homes with their families and their loved ones. So, like I said previously, maybe some of us are not looking forward to getting back to normal, right? Maybe we weren't really social or really didn't like going out in the first place. And so being able to be home and have all of our conveniences right here close to us, maybe that was heaven for us, right? And so we don't want to go back to the way things were. So for some, this brings about an extreme fear, which can be associated with the disease or anxiety about just getting back into society. Others have found that the pandemic has brought about positive changes in their lives and they're afraid of losing what they've gained. So maybe you have more time at home to cook your meals because you don't have to commute to work. Maybe you have more uninterrupted time with your family and your loved ones because there's not that need to be outside of the house, right? And so maybe you're like, okay, well, I have to get up and go back to work. I have to get back out and do this. And so I'm going to lose all of those positive things that I've gained and enjoyed during the pandemic. So it's important to pace yourself and to breathe and to consider gradually exposing yourself to social situations at a level that is comfortable for you, and possibly finding a balance between um, your responsibilities and those luxuries or experiences that you came to enjoy during the pandemic. Find a balance between your new normal and the positive changes, and try to experiment with different levels of those balance. Like, find a balance that works for you and your family. So now I want to go into talking about self-care. We kind of briefly mentioned ways that we can address our anxiety and our fears, but we also want to look at ways to take a proactive approach, right? What can I do on a regular basis to potentially keep my levels of anxiety and stress and worry and fear to a manageable level? And so this is our wheel of self-care. And so it just talks about the different areas that we can show ourselves compassion, so show ourselves care and attention so that we can keep our emotional and physical levels balanced. So these include our emotional and our mental health, our spiritual practices, meaningful work. So not just mundane, activities, but work that really brings us fulfillment, that brings us enjoyment, that gives us a sense of purpose. Our physical health, so that can be exercising, eating, healthy, making sure you get adequate levels of sleep, and also our social attachment. So our friends that are good sources of support. Um, Activities that we like to do that bring us enjoyment. So one thing that I used to like to do that would be like my self-care was going to the movies or maybe getting my nails done. So in the thick of the pandemic, we weren't really able to do those things. But now that Texas is, kind of opening back up and we're, approaching a new normal, I'm very much looking forward to being able to go back and do those things that kind of help me to calm down and center myself and that I enjoy. So as I mentioned before, some things that we can do to engage in self-care. So we can take care of our body, right? Our physical body. So making sure that we get enough sleep nightly, right? Making sure that we hydrate ourselves with water. Making sure that we participate in regular physical activities. Even if that means maybe cutting your lunch short 15 minutes and going on a walk, or taking one of your 15-minute breaks during the day to go for a walk. Those things, slowly but surely can really make a difference. Eating healthy, right? So maybe we cut out one soda a day. Maybe we cut out one, junk food, a day, or maybe say, okay, well, only on Wednesdays I'm going to have this. Those little bitty differences really do come together to make a huge difference. Avoiding excessive caffeine, tobacco, alcohol, and drugs. Limiting our screen time is always a really good idea too, about roughly 30 minutes to an hour before you go to sleep. Really, shut off all screens, because research has showed that blue light really affects our sleep and makes it, less restful and satisfying. And also taking the time to relax and recharge, whatever that looks like for us, whatever brings us relaxation or allows us to recharge. For some, that's being around others and those that we love, and for some that is kind of taking time away, right? Taking time to ourselves. So in taking care of our body, it's also important to take care of our minds, right? So making sure that you keep your regular routine, try to stay as consistent with that routine as possible. Limiting our exposure to news and media. There is just a constant influx of information and news breakage and stories, some that are heartwarming and great, and some that are not so great. And so it's important to pay attention to how our exposure or our immersement in that can have an effect on our mood. And to maybe limit our exposure to some of the things that maybe bring us more stress or heighten our anxiety. Finding pleasant distractions. So that could be going for a walk. That could be gardening if you garden. That could be, maybe drawing or coloring or painting. Whatever is pleasant for you that kind of gets you out of your head and allows you to experience a few minutes of enjoyment. Focusing on positive thoughts, right? Being mindful to focus on things that bring you peace, that are calming. Maybe giving positive affirmations, right? Saying positive things about yourself, writing those on your mirror or on your wall so that you can see them every day. Those things can be helpful. Using your faith and your spirituality. So whether that's attending church, attending mass, praying, reading, whatever it is that kind of brings you that spiritual connectedness and groundedness. Mindfulness or meditation or deep breathing. And so a little later, I'm going to have a slide of some apps that can assist you with that, assist you with mindfulness and deep breathing and meditation. One thing that I really like to do, journaling. So maybe getting those thoughts out of your head and onto paper can sometimes help you not only organize your thoughts, but kind of give you a sense of insight into what it is that you're dealing with and what's going on. And then connecting with others. So that can be family members, they can be friends. I think we're all looking forward to, or I won't say all, but I'll say for myself, I am looking forward to being able to connect with people and family members that I have not been able to during this pandemic, because for me, that just brings me, it just helps to center me and to help, that's a recharge. So one thing that we can do to kind of help center ourselves and to kind of bring down anxiety is something that we refer to as belly breathing. So belly breathing is where you sit or lie flat in a comfortable position. You put one hand on your belly, just below your ribs, and then the other hand on your chest. And you take a deep breath in through your nose. And while you're taking that breath in through your nose, you let your belly push your hand out. So as you inhale, you should feel your belly coming out and pressing against your hand. Then you'll breathe out through pursed lips as if you were whistling. So taking that nice, slow, controlled breath out. And then as you breathe out, you feel the hand on your belly go in and use it to push all the air out. So you can do this breathing exercise 3 to 10 times or as many times as you need to, and just take your time with each breath. And as you do this breathing exercise, you can notice how you feel at the end of the exercise, right? So does it help you to feel more calm? Does it slow your heart rate down? Does it kind of clear your head? And so those are the things that we want to achieve as we're doing this exercise. So let's talk a little bit about when to seek treatment. So if your anxiety or your stress is your fear or your fears are interfering with your work, interfering with your ability to be productive at work, to meet deadlines, to get projects pushed out, or if it's interfering with your relationships or other part of your life, if you feel like your anxiety is difficult to control, or if you notice that you're feeling more sad, crying more than usual, you're having trouble with alcohol or drug abuse, or any other mental health concerns along with anxiety, then it's important to reach out to a mental health professional, right? That's when we know that things are not right. If it's affecting our health and affecting our productivity in our normal life, then it's time to seek treatment. If we find that we are having suicidal thoughts, right, or we're thinking about harming ourselves, maybe we're just wondering if people around us would be better off if we weren't here, if we maybe feel like we want to go to sleep and not wake up, if we're kind of making plans to, prepare others for us not being here, then those are things that are really concerning. And it's really important to reach out to a loved one or to some of the mental health resources that we have here in the county. And I'll get to those at a later slide. But if you are experiencing suicidal ideation or you're feeling like you don't want to be here anymore, it's important that you reach out to someone. You are not alone, and there are people who care about you and care for you and want to help you. So briefly, we will discuss some effective treatments for managing fear and anxiety. So one treatment that has been shown to be really effective in the management of anxiety is cognitive behavioral therapy. And so a really helpful thing to remember about CBT is the ABCs of CBT. That's alphabet soup, right? That's a lot of letters, but we'll go through it really quickly. So the A is addressing the adversity or the activating event, right? So in this situation, it might be losing a job, losing a loved one during the pandemic, being forced to, remain at home. What is our activating event, right? What has caused us the adversity in our lives? And then B, we want to address our beliefs about the event, right? So that can involve both obvious and underlying thoughts about situations, ourselves, and others. How this adversity or this activating event is impacting us, right? What beliefs do we have about the event? What beliefs do we have about ourselves? What beliefs do we have about others? And how is that event impacting that? And then consequences, which include your behavioral or emotional response. So these thoughts, these beliefs that I have about this event and how it's impacted me, how has that changed my behavior, right? Do I have a lot of anxiety? Am I more sad? Do I not feel like being productive anymore? Um, and so in addressing these three factors, CBT really helps us change how we think about ourselves and situations in the future, um, and can teach us skills to cope with these adverse feelings that we might be experiencing. Dr. Almeida, did you want to say anything else?
Yeah, I was just going to add, so sometimes what this looks like is, something happens bad to us, and, we create these like negative schemas about, the event, or so, I'm having a bad day. I'm having to go back into the office. Last time I was in the office, I had to meet with my boss. It didn't go well, right? So then it's like just that event of having to go back into the office creates that anxiety, concern that this is going to happen again. It's like, oh, this is going to happen again. I'm a bad employee. I'm going to get fired. So you can kind of see how, the experience of one event then becomes generalized and problematic. So some of it is, and then, so some of it is, how do we restructure our thinking? Like, okay, that was a bad situation, but I got over it. I didn't get fired. I still have a job. I can get through this, and then really working through those things and reinforcing yourself for getting through it. Like, okay, I got through the first day of going back to school, or I got through the first day of going back into the office, and it was okay. I made it. I think those are really important things, because then you kind of, you build up that resiliency. Okay, I can get through this again. Happens a lot with children, like experiencing anxiety in school. They failed a test. Well, they're going to fail every other test, and they're going to flunk out of school, and and it's, they're not going to be able to get a job. That's kind of that negative schemas, those negative thoughts, how one event can lead to this generalization about a variety of things and about who we are. So really trying to refocus and restructure that thinking, and I'm losing the term pretty loosely, but keeping it in perspective, going, okay, I can get through this. And then really, I got through it. I got in the office. I got into school. I was able to sit down. I made it. Um, you know, a lot of folks have heard about like systematic desensitization, or, like that gradual exposure. It's like, unfortunately, we don't have that flexibility, but it's sort of, as Chrissy mentioned, gradually transitioning back into those environments, so if you're really struggling with something, instead of maybe having the big family gathering, you just have a gathering with 5 people. Maybe if you have the flexibility, and instead of going back to work in the office full time, maybe you can come up with a hybrid approach to work, which I think Chrissy also mentioned. Yeah, it's definitely challenging, especially if the expectation is for children to go back into the classroom. We have a lot of children that have actually done better virtually. And as Chrissy mentioned, there have been some advantages of that, individuals that have some social anxiety, or being home provides some comfort and makes them feel safer. But again, we just wanted to talk briefly about this CBT because there's different versions of it, but it really is the basis for several interventions that have been developed to help people deal with anxiety and depression, actually. That was it, Chris.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Okay, so I mean, we've covered a lot today, right? We've talked about things to be mindful and aware of as we transition back into society, right? As we, really work to find our new normal. And as Dr. Almeida mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we don't really know what normal looks like. Just because this is something that we haven't really experienced before in the past. And so I think it's important to find the normal that works best for you, right? Whatever you feel like your normal is, finding that balance and and sticking with that and finding what works, for you and your family. So these are just a few resources that I wanted to go through really quickly. So we talked about mindfulness and meditation in regards to kind of keeping our levels of stress and anxiety down. These are a couple of websites that can give you more information about mindfulness practices, things that you can do on a daily basis and kind of integrate into your regular routine to increase mindfulness in your everyday life. Also, the John Zen videos on YouTube are really good visual representations of where he kind of walks you through like what to do and some mindfulness practices that you can incorporate. There are a few meditation apps that are free through the App Store that you can download onto your phone and maybe incorporate throughout your day, like while you're at work or out doing errands. These include the Insight Timer, the Smiling Mind app, the Stop, Breathe, and Think app, and the UCLA Mindfulness app. And then these are a few COVID-19 and mental health resources. So the Mayo Clinic website has some information regarding mental health and COVID-19, some resources that might be available in your area. Also, the CDC has guidelines and also information for daily coping and managing stress and anxiety as we continue to migrate through this pandemic. And then there's also the Texans Recovering Together COVID-19 Outreach Program. I have the number included here and also the website that provide additional mental health resources for those that are for all of us as we work to kind of transition through this pandemic. Dr. Almeida, did you want to say anything additional about any of these?
No, I just wanted to mention that that last resource that Chrissy just talked about, that's actually free of charge. And they provide case management, I believe some brief counseling services. And again, it is free of charge. So, and it is available to Fort Bend County residents.
So these are our local resources here in Fort Bend County. So our office, which is the Fort Bend County Behavioral Health Services, and our telephone number is 281-238-3079. Typically, we work really closely with those that are matriculating through our jail and through the criminal justice system. But there are special instances where we provide mental health services to those that are in the community that do not have legal histories. And as always, you are more than welcome to call our office to get more information about not only the resources that we provide, but the some of the resources that are available in the county. There's also our mental health provider here in Fort Bend County, which is the Texan Center. And their number is 281-239-1300. And the website is also posted here. So Texana typically deals with our more severe, like serious mental illnesses, like, severe depression, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, with psychosis, and provides those therapy services, case management services, and sometimes wraparound supports, right? We also have the Texan 24-hour crisis hotline. And so that number is available 24 hours, even after the Texana clinic has closed, to provide mental health resources and assistance. Here is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. So that is also a 24-hour number that you can call if you or someone you know is struggling with suicidal thoughts or thoughts of self-harm. There's also the NAMI of Greater Houston, who provides mental health resources here for, the Houston and surrounding areas. Mental Health of America of Greater Houston, which is a program similar to NAMI that provides mental health resources for those in the Houston and surrounding areas. There's also the Houston Galveston Institute, Fort Bend Social Services, Helping Hands, which is like a food pantry, and they also provide clothes to those that are in need in the community. And Catholic Charities is also they also provide food and clothing and other resources to those that are in need.
I just wanted to mention probably another number that we should have included is our Fort Bend County Crisis Intervention Team, which is out of the Sheriff's Office. So I'm just going to mention that number is 281-341-4665. 281-341-4665. That's the non-emergency number. Of course, if it's an emergency, you call 911 and ask for a CIT officer. So just wanted to mention that also. Thank you, Chrissy. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yeah. I don't think there's any questions in the chat box, and I can't, I don't know if there's anything on the Facebook page. We're monitoring those, but so if somebody wants to text me or let me know if there's any questions. If not, again, this is posted, and you can always call our office if you need more information. Really appreciate Chrissy you taking the time to put this together. Part of it is what I really encourage people is just be aware of what's going on in your mind, what's going on in your body. Some of this is situational. Okay, we've talked about that. If it becomes more problematic, if your coping strategies that have worked in the past are not working, if it starts interfering with your ability to function, with your relationships, your ability to go to work, take care of your children, then that's when you need to reach out. Reach out to your doctor, reach out to a mental health professional. Just reach out. So you know your body the best. Parents know their children the best. Sometimes it's really difficult as a parent to think that something is wrong. But again, we've been talking about this whole month. Mental illness and mental health disorders impact adults. They also impact children. Up to 20% of the children have a mental health disorder at some point in time. It can vary from things such as ADHD, anxiety, to more severe disorders. So you need to pay attention to those. Most mental health disorders actually have an onset before the age of 24. I think about 50% actually before the age of 14. So you really need to pay attention to that, not only in yourself, but in your children. Unfortunately, only about 20% of the children that have a mental health disorder get the help from a qualified mental health professional. So we have a long ways to go in terms of really developing a system where people can get the help that they need. this is a first step. Just get the word out, get the information out. And thank you all. Appreciate it. Thanks. Thank you, Chrissy.
Thank you.